Welcome to Infidelity Diaries. Explore the secrets and stories of infidelity with us. I always thought my life was a well-organized mechanism. Every day, from the moment the sun rose, I lived as if by a set schedule: work, meetings, projects, and James. My husband was an integral part of this mechanism, but over time, something went wrong, and the gears started to turn slower. We both focused on building our careers, investing in our future, but between us, there was an increasing emptiness. We almost stopped talking, like two people living under the same roof but on different planets. I never thought that at some point, my heart would start beating differently, that I would begin to seek answers, not in our home, but somewhere outside of it. But life is unpredictable. Everything changed when a new colleague, Adam Brown, joined our team. Adam was the complete opposite of James. Tall, athletic, with an easy smile and the demeanor of someone who was always interested in what was happening around him. He had this confident gaze that could catch every detail, but he never meddled in others' affairs. That's what I liked about him. Being with him was easy and free, as if we had always known each other. When Adam first walked into the office, I noticed how the women in the team brightened up. Jokes, laughter. It seemed like his presence somehow changed the whole office dynamic. I didn't even realize how I began spending more time with him. We laughed about silly situations at work, discussed projects, and it was unexpectedly pleasant to feel the lightness in our conversations, something I had been missing with James for a long time. But something inside me was alarmed. This feeling, I couldn't ignore it. I knew it wasn't just friendship, but I didn't want to admit that there could be something more between us. After all, I loved James, didn't I? Or had I just gotten used to him? The questions, for which I had no answers, became a shadow in my thoughts. One evening, coming home, I noticed how James tiredly sat down at the table, barely glancing in my direction. He immersed himself in his legal documents, as if I was just another part of his routine day. I wanted to say something, maybe take a step toward him, but the words stuck somewhere in my throat. I knew he was tired too. We were both tired. Of this marriage? Of our careers? Or simply of a life that had suddenly become too predictable? In the days that followed, Adam began appearing in my life more frequently. We started having breakfast together before morning meetings, sometimes grabbing coffee after work. He turned out to be an attentive conversationalist, someone who knew how to listen without interrupting. I began to catch myself smiling when I saw his message on my phone screen. It felt strange, but there was so much life in it, a kind of life I hadn't felt with James in a long time. Sometimes I wondered if this was right. But what exactly was I doing wrong? We were just colleagues, just friends, weren't we? I hadn't crossed any lines, so everything was fine, I told myself. But deep down, I knew these justifications sounded too easy, as if I was already ready to cross that line. One night, when James stayed late at work and I came home, I felt a sharp emptiness in our house. The silence was deafening. I walked over to the window and looked out at the street, trying to catch myself in a thought. What if all of this could be different? What if this emptiness wasn't just the result of our busyness, but something more? The next day, during another lunch with Adam, he looked at me a little longer than usual. I felt my heart skip a beat. I tried to ignore it, but something inside me had already turned in a new direction. This feeling, this tension between us, had become too obvious to ignore any longer. I didn't know how this would end, but something told me that the story I was getting pulled into would change everything. Every day, I convinced myself that it was just work, just friendship, just conversation that wasn't supposed to mean anything more. But the more time we spent together, the harder it became to believe that lie. Adam was no longer just a colleague. He had become the person I wanted to be near. The connection between us, barely noticeable at first, grew stronger with each glance, with each word. When I arrived at the office, the first thing I did was look for him. There was something magical in the way he turned toward me, smiling slightly, as if knowing that I was watching him. We sat next to each other in meetings, had lunch together, and even discussed matters that were specific to his department. Sometimes I found myself forgetting my responsibilities and simply listening to his voice. That voice, so confident, calm, drew me in. It had something I had been missing for so long: genuine attention and care. Adam and I started staying later at the office. It seemed like neither of us was in a hurry to leave. His presence beside me was calming, yet at the same time thrilling. In those moments, I thought of James. He felt more distant, like a background presence in my life. In the evenings, I would come home, see him either working or absorbed in the television, and everything that had once been so important now seemed foreign. We hardly spoke, and it began to irritate me. One day, after a long day at work, Adam suggested we grab a coffee. We sat in a cozy cafe near the office. I don't remember what we talked about, but every look, every movement he made was etched into my memory. At some point, I felt a silent understanding grow between us, something that was just ours. Time stretched out slowly, and I felt every minute of that silent tension. "Have you ever thought about how things could be different?" he asked suddenly. I flinched, as if he had read my mind. That question caught me off guard. I didn't know how to answer, and the feeling of helplessness before my own desire made me feel weak. "What do you mean?" I tried to deflect, though I understood perfectly well what he meant. That life is more than just work and obligations. We get so caught up in making sure everything goes according to plan that we forget about ourselves, about what we truly want. His eyes studied me, as if searching for the answer in my face. I brushed it off, pretending his words meant nothing to me. But he knew better. When I came home, James wasn't there again. He had texted me, saying he'd be working late. I realized that evenings like this would become the norm, and it gave me too much time to think. I started noticing that I was thinking less about us, James and me, and more about Adam. In the following weeks, Adam and I began to seek out more opportunities to be alone. Sometimes we would sit in silence, simply enjoying each other's company. That silence between us wasn't awkward. Rather, it was filled with a tension that could explode at any moment. We both knew it, but neither of us dared to take the next step yet. I felt the pull between us growing stronger, becoming too obvious to ignore any longer. One evening, at a corporate gathering held in a restaurant, I noticed Adam glancing at me from time to time. These weren't just friendly looks. His eyes said more than any words he could have spoken. I caught myself realizing that my feelings for him wouldn't let go. But what could I do? I was married, and I had James, the man with whom I had spent the past several years of my life. We were a team, a family, but somewhere along the way, we had lost ourselves. As the event came to an end, Adam approached me, and his hand brushed against mine, seemingly by accident. In that moment, I understood that the line I had been so afraid to cross was now dangerously close. That brief touch, though fleeting, made my heart race. I knew it was the beginning of something more. "Want to go for a walk?" he suggested, and his voice sounded less like a question and more like a statement. I couldn't refuse. We stepped outside, where the warm evening breeze gently played with my hair. We walked side by side, almost in silence, but the silence between us was so thick I could feel it. Every step felt slow, every second intense. We reached a park, almost empty of people. Adam stopped, and I felt his hand brush against mine again. This time, I didn't pull away. My thoughts spun around one question. Why couldn't I resist this? What was drawing me to him? I looked at him, and in his eyes, I saw the same thing I felt inside myself. We both knew this wasn't just friendship, but I didn't know what to do with these feelings. "Rebecca." His voice was quiet, but at the same time firm. "Don't say anything," I whispered, feeling that any word could shatter this moment. We stood there in the darkness of the park, and in that moment, something ignited between us that couldn't be ignored. But I still wasn't ready to take that step. Not today. Though deep down, I knew that moment was inevitable. The corporate party was held on one of the top floors of a hotel, with panoramic windows offering a stunning view of the night city. The lighting was just enough to create a cozy, almost intimate atmosphere, but people still felt relaxed and free. James couldn't make it. His work had consumed him once again. And in that moment, as I stepped into the room, I realized that tonight, I was on my own. Adam was there too, looking as effortlessly confident as always. We exchanged glances across the room, and a shiver ran down my spine. There was something about the way he looked at me, as if he knew all my thoughts, as if he could already predict what would happen next. The evening dragged on slowly. Everyone around me was laughing, talking, drinking. It felt like I was inside a bubble, separated from everyone. But with every passing minute, I felt Adam's presence more acutely, his gaze piercing me from a distance. I couldn't distract myself, even if I had tried. After a while, when the group conversations began to tire me, I stepped out onto the terrace to be alone for a few minutes. The fresh air slightly cooled my thoughts, but not for long. Soon, I heard someone step out behind me. Turning my head, I saw Adam. "Tired of all this?" he asked, approaching. His voice was calm, but there was something more in it. Not just politeness, but a desire to take our conversation to another level. "A little," I replied, feeling a mix of unease and something else building up inside me. Something dangerous. We stood side by side, looking out at the city lights, which seemed endless. I could feel how his presence sharpened all my senses. His hand casually touched the railing, and at that moment, our silence became the very connection we could no longer ignore. "We can leave here," Adam suddenly suggested, and his voice sounded as if it was the most natural option. "And go where?" I asked, slightly turning my head and meeting his gaze. His eyes gleamed in the soft light of the lamps, and suddenly I felt my heart begin to race. He didn't answer immediately, just looked at me. We stood so close that only a few inches separated us. I knew this moment was a turning point, but I still couldn't make myself walk away. I was here, with him, and it felt right, even if it was entirely wrong. "Rebecca," his voice was low and serious, "have you ever thought about what could happen if we allowed ourselves just a little more?" Those words stirred something strange within me, a mix of fear and excitement. I couldn't look at him for too long, so I turned my gaze back to the city, but his closeness made it impossible to escape. He was too near, too real. My body refused to obey the warnings from my mind. Adam knew there was something between us, and I could no longer deny it. "You know this isn't right," I finally said, but my voice trembled with betrayal. "Is it?" he whispered back, taking a step closer. "And what's right? Living the way you are now? Ignoring what's happening here, between us?" I knew he was right. There had been something more than just friendship or work between us for a long time. I felt it in every conversation, every glance, every accidental touch. But I was afraid. Afraid that once I crossed this line, there would be no going back. In that moment, he reached out and lightly touched my hand. His touch was barely perceptible, but a wave of electricity surged through my entire body. I wanted to say something, to leave, but my legs felt rooted to the ground. Everything happened too quickly in that instant. Adam moved closer, and I felt his breath on my cheek. My mind screamed at me to stop, but my body said something completely different. His lips brushed against mine, at first barely noticeable, as if he was giving me a chance to pull away. But I couldn't. The world around me froze. His kiss was soft but insistent, awakening something in me that I had been ignoring for a long time. I felt his hands slip onto my shoulders, and my heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. In that moment, I realized I had crossed the line, and there was no turning back. I pulled away for a moment, breathing heavily, trying to gather my thoughts. We stood so close that I could feel his warmth. There was something new in his eyes, something I hadn't seen before, desire that had taken hold of us both. "I can't," I whispered, but even in those words, there was weakness. "You've already made your choice." His voice was calm, yet held such power that I knew he wouldn't back down. I closed my eyes, trying to find the strength to walk away, but his hand, gently wrapped around my waist, held me in place. It was too much. Too many emotions, too many feelings, too much desire. "This is wrong," I whispered again, but this time, I didn't believe my own words. Adam responded with only a glance. We both understood that there was no going back. I felt as though I was standing at the edge of a cliff, ready to take a step forward. My heart was pounding so hard that I could barely breathe. We stood in a secluded spot, hidden from prying eyes, but the realization that we had gone too far didn't leave me. When I returned home, the clock had already struck past midnight. Darkness enveloped our house, and the silence was so dense that it seemed to absorb every one of my steps. As I opened the door, I tried not to make a sound, hoping James was already asleep. My heart was still racing, my thoughts were in chaos, and my lips burned from Adam's kiss. Every time I touched my lips, memories of that moment flared up inside me. I couldn't shake the feeling, and it wasn't just about the kiss. It was something more. It was the realization that I could no longer go back. I slowly walked into the living room, took off my coat, and tried to suppress the shiver that arose from the clash with reality. I hadn't physically cheated, but mentally, I had. This thought stirred fear within me, but at the same time, an overwhelming desire consumed me. I could still feel Adam's presence, as if his hand was still resting on my waist, his breath brushing against my neck. "You're late!" A voice came from the darkness, and I flinched. James was sitting on the couch, his silhouette almost blending into the night's shadows. He was dressed in his usual home t-shirt and sweatpants, but his gaze was tense, almost wary. I hadn't expected him to be waiting for me. There was something in his eyes I couldn't decipher. Tiredness, suspicion, or maybe just curiosity. "Yeah." The party dragged on, I said, trying to sound calm, though inside I was trembling with nerves. "How was your day?" He nodded, but his eyes didn't leave me. That look was different, not like before. There was something strange in it, as if he was studying me, searching for something in my behavior. "It was fine, but you look different," he remarked. I felt the heat of fear rise through my body. Did he know? Did he notice something? Or was he just tired and irritated? My thoughts spun around one thing. Could he suspect? But how could he know? After all, we had just kissed. No one had seen it. And everything that had happened between Adam and me remained our little secret. But that secret was burning me from the inside. "Probably just tired," I replied, trying to speak lightly, but there was a note of tension in my voice that I couldn't hide. James stood up from the couch and walked over to me. His approach made me freeze. I couldn't look him in the eye, afraid I would see judgment, disappointment in his gaze. He was so close that I could smell him, and yet now that scent seemed distant, foreign to me. My guilt weighed down on me so heavily that I could barely breathe. "Rebecca?" His voice was soft but insistent. "Are you all right?" I nodded, but couldn't utter a word. A storm was raging inside me. My attraction to Adam was growing stronger with each passing day, no matter how hard I tried to suppress it. I couldn't stop thinking about his hands, about how his touch made me forget everything. But I was here, with James, the man I had promised to be faithful to. He studied me with his gaze, as if trying to look into my soul. I feared he could read my thoughts, see all those dark desires I was hiding behind a calm exterior. The conflict inside me was becoming almost unbearable. On one side was my guilt, on the other, the irresistible desire. "I'm fine," I whispered, finally gathering the strength to speak. "Just tired." But even to me, those words sounded unconvincing. James continued to look at me, and I couldn't meet his gaze. Inside me, a storm of emotions raged. Guilt, fear, desire. All these feelings tangled into one complicated knot that I couldn't untie. James furrowed his brow slightly, but didn't say anything. He didn't seem to want to delve deeper into the conversation. We both understood that something had changed in our relationship, but neither of us wanted to be the first to bring it up. I felt relieved when I realized he didn't intend to question me further. "All right, I'm going to bed," he finally said, kissing me on the forehead. It was a familiar gesture that now felt almost foreign. That kiss didn't stir any emotions in me, only intensified the sense of emptiness. When he went to the bedroom, I remained standing in place, unable to move. My heart was still racing. I knew I had taken a step towards something from which there would be no turning back. I loved James, or I once had. But somewhere along the way, we had lost our connection. I didn't know if I could restore it or if I even wanted to. I went to the bathroom to wash up, but caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were filled with anxiety. "Who are you now?" I asked myself, but there was no answer. I no longer knew who I was or what I wanted. My attraction to Adam had become too strong to simply ignore it. I understood that a new chapter had begun in my life, but at what cost? Lying in bed, I tried to fall asleep, but the thoughts of the kiss wouldn't leave me. I remembered how his lips touched mine, how his arm wrapped around my waist. I relived that moment, as if it was happening right here, right now. My body responded to these memories, while my mind screamed that it was wrong. But it was too late. I had crossed the line. When James turned toward me in his sleep, I felt my heart clench. A real storm was raging inside me. I wanted to be a good wife, but at the same time, I couldn't stop what I was feeling for Adam. This inner conflict wouldn't let me rest, and I knew that soon I would have to make a choice. But what choice? Every day after that kiss with Adam felt like something new, something extraordinary. I felt like my life had split into before and after. Each morning, waking up next to James, I couldn't shake the feeling of guilt. But as soon as I got to work and saw Adam, all of that vanished, giving way to a new, overwhelming emotion that was impossible to ignore. We started seeing each other secretly, even though we never discussed it aloud. It just happened naturally. One evening after work, he suggested we go to dinner together, and I agreed without a hint of hesitation. Our first meetings were casual, almost innocent, as if we were trying to convince ourselves that nothing serious was happening. But with each time, each look, each touch, I understood more and more that we had already crossed a line. Our first real encounter, when we were completely alone, happened in the office parking lot. It was late in the evening, after all the colleagues had left. We sat in his car, talking, but the tension between us was so strong that words almost lost their meaning. "You understand that this is—" I began, but Adam interrupted me. "I know." His voice was low and confident. He wasn't uncertain about any of his actions. "But we both feel the same thing." He was right. Inside, I was torn by a storm of contradictions, but as soon as his hand touched mine, all doubts disappeared. We both knew it was wrong, but we couldn't stop. He leaned in closer, and I felt the warmth of his body. In that moment, I could no longer resist. His lips met mine again, and this time the kiss was long, deep, passionate. His hand slid down my back, and I felt my knees weaken from the tension and desire. That moment was like an explosion. Everything we had been hiding spilled out. "We can't stay here," I whispered, barely pulling away from his lips. "Let's go," he said without hesitation. We drove out of the city to a secluded spot he knew. I didn't ask questions, just followed him. We were too consumed by each other to think about the consequences. When we stopped, it was a quiet corner of the forest, far from prying eyes. I had never seen him like this. There was a fire in his eyes that mirrored my own desire. I knew we had crossed the point of no return. In the car, away from the rest of the world, we kissed again. Our kisses became more and more hungry, and I could feel the passion consuming us both. We were closer than we had ever been before. In that moment, I forgot everything, about James, about my life, about the guilt. The only thing that mattered was that I was with Adam, that his arms were around me, that his breath was brushing against my skin. Our meetings became regular. We found secluded places, parks, deserted beaches, his apartment when he was alone. Each time I saw him, my heart skipped a beat in anticipation. We both knew we were playing with fire, but it only heightened the excitement of our relationship. With each meeting, I felt something growing between us, something more than just physical attraction. We understood each other with half a word, half a glance. I began to share with him things I had never told James. I told him about my dreams, my fears, about how lost I felt. And each time, he listened with the attention I had been missing at home. One day, after one of our meetings at a cafe, Adam suggested we spend a day out of town. It was like a breath of fresh air. We rented a cabin by a lake, far from everyone and everything. I remember waking up in his arms, feeling the warmth of his body, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in the right place. We spent the entire day together, walking through the woods, swimming in the lake, laughing, talking about everything and nothing. It was like a movie, like one of those stories where everything seems perfect. But I knew it couldn't last forever. The more time we spent together, the more I felt the guilt towards James. He started asking questions, noticing my distance. His attempts to reconnect became more insistent, but they only intensified my feelings of guilt. Each time I came home after meeting Adam, I saw the confusion in James's eyes. He didn't understand what was happening, and I couldn't explain it to him. But despite all the guilt, I continued seeing Adam. We both understood that our relationship had become something more than just a casual fling. He was becoming the person I once thought James was. His attention, his care, his confidence that what we were doing was right, calmed my fears. But with each encounter, I began to wonder, how long would this last? Adam and I tried to live in the moment, without thinking about the future. But a voice inside me told me that we would soon have to face reality. I felt that our secret meetings could one day be exposed, and I wasn't ready for what that might mean for both of us. For now, we enjoyed every moment as if it were the last chance to be together. But I knew that this fire burning between us could one day consume everything I once thought was my life. When Adam suggested spending the weekend together in a quiet, secluded house far from the city, I knew it would be our little escape from reality. I agreed almost instantly, despite the slight anxiety fluttering inside me. I told James I was going to visit a friend for the weekend, and it was the first real lie I'd ever told him, fully convinced that hiding the truth was the only way. The cabin turned out to be a cozy, wooden structure tucked away in the forest. When we arrived, I felt like I had stepped into a parallel universe where there were no obligations or guilt. All that mattered was the moment here and now, when Adam and I could be alone, without looking over our shoulders at the outside world. I had never felt anything like this before. Here, in this secluded place, I felt truly free. Adam and I spent the whole day walking around the area, laughing and talking. It felt like the world had paused, and we were outside of time and space. His presence calmed me, giving me a sense of belonging. At the same time, every touch from him made my heart race, and waves of heat surged through my body. As the evening fell over the forest, we returned to the house. Adam lit the fireplace, and the room filled with a soft, warm glow. We sat on the rug, near the fire, with glasses of wine in hand. His eyes were fixed on me, and in them, I saw something I couldn't deny. It was more than just passion. "Have you ever thought about it?" he asked quietly, his voice breaking the silence without disturbing its peace. "Thought about what exactly?" I replied, even though I knew perfectly well what he meant. That this is more than just a game. His words sank deep into my consciousness. I looked at him and understood that it really was more than a game. This wasn't just an affair, not just passion. I had grown attached to him so deeply that it was beginning to scare me. Before, everything seemed easier. I could think that this was temporary, that it would end on its own. But now, I couldn't imagine my life without him. "I don't know," I admitted, feeling my heart start to pound in my chest. "All of this, it's so complicated." "It doesn't have to be complicated, Rebecca." He took my hand and gently squeezed it. "We can be together if that's what you want." I met his gaze, and inside me arose the sharp realization that I was standing at the edge of a precipice. I could take a step forward and allow myself to go further, or stop and turn back. But some part of me already knew that the choice had been made. Adam had become a part of my life, and I couldn't just erase him from it. "I don't know what I want," I whispered, feeling my thoughts swirling in a storm of emotions. "But I know I don't want this to end." He moved closer to me, his face illuminated by the soft light of the fire. His touch was tender, yet filled with desire. I felt his breath on my skin, and every nerve in my body responded to his touch. In that moment, all that existed was us. I forgot about everything outside these walls, forgot about all the problems and doubts. His lips met mine, and this kiss was unlike any before. It was deep, profound, and in it, I felt everything I couldn't express in words. The passion that had been building between us for so long burst forth. Every touch was electric. Every gesture felt like a new discovery. We crossed the boundary we had thought about for so long, and now there was no turning back. All that mattered was the two of us and this moment. Afterward, we lay on the rug in front of the fireplace, our bodies still entwined, our breathing heavy but calm. I stared into the fire, feeling as though a new reality had settled in my heart. This was no longer just a physical connection. I was bound to him on a much deeper level. Adam had become someone I couldn't let go of, even if I tried. "I can't live a double life anymore," I suddenly said, surprised by my own words. He turned his head. His gaze was gentle yet serious. "I don't want you to feel guilty," he said softly. "But I want you to be happy. We deserve that." His words washed over me like a gentle wave, enveloping me completely. I couldn't deny what I felt. With every meeting, I realized that my attachment to him was growing stronger. This was no longer just infatuation or passion. It was something much deeper than I had imagined. But with that realization came another. I was drifting further away from my past life, from James. "This is wrong," I whispered. though deep down I wasn't sure of my own words. "But you want this, don't you?" His voice was soft but resolute. I couldn't deny the truth. My heart and mind were torn apart, but in that moment, I knew only one thing. I wanted to be with him. I didn't know where this would lead, but I had already made my choice. We spent the weekend as if time had stopped. It was just the two of us, and it was our little world where nothing existed but us. But I knew that reality would return, and I would have to face the consequences of my choices. Returning home after the weekend with Adam, I felt like I was standing at the threshold of two worlds. One world was filled with passion, excitement, and new emotions. The other was my real life, the one I had grown used to considering normal. But now, all of it was tangled in a knot of guilt, fear, and desire. As I stepped into the house, my heart began to race. I didn't know what to expect when I saw James. Usually, I came back to an empty house. James was busy with work or meetings with colleagues, and our interactions were reduced to rare dinners or brief conversations before bed. But this time, when I walked in, he was home. He was sitting at the kitchen table, and in front of him was a vase with flowers, something that immediately caught my eye. When I met his gaze, something inside me tightened. "Hi," he said, smiling. It was the same smile that used to make my heart flutter, but now it only triggered a wave of guilt. "I thought you might like a little surprise." I froze for a moment, trying to find the right words. Flowers? His care? It was unexpected and surprising. James wasn't one to give me gifts often or arrange surprises like this. His gestures were always driven by practicality. But at that moment, he seemed genuinely trying to show that he cared. "Thank you. That's very sweet." I tried to smile, but inside, everything was churning. My smile came out forced, like a mask I hoped to keep in place. James approached me and hugged me, his arms wrapping gently around my waist. My body tensed with surprise. I wasn't ready for his touch, not after what had happened with Adam. The inner conflict was tearing me apart. His closeness should have made me feel safe and warm, but instead, I felt rising tension. "I've been thinking we need to spend more time together," he said, not letting go. "We're both so busy, and I know it's affected our relationship, but I want us to be close again." I stood there, feeling his warmth, and couldn't find the words. What he was saying seemed right. He was right. We had drifted apart, our connection weakened by work and daily routine. But instead of acknowledging my own fault, I felt panic rising inside me. All my thoughts about the recent weekend with Adam, about how much I enjoyed every moment with him, felt like a knife slicing through my feelings. "I want that too," I forced out, though the words felt empty. They didn't reflect the turmoil inside me. I stood there, feeling his arms around me, and wondered how I had ended up in this situation. Why was I where I shouldn't be? Why had I allowed myself to get swept away by someone else, when James was, perhaps, trying to bring us back together? James looked at me with a tenderness I hadn't seen in a long time. It was as if he was asking for forgiveness for all the times he had been distant. I saw the determination in his eyes to fix our relationship, but I was no longer the same woman he once knew. My connection with Adam had become something much more than just physical attraction. I had grown attached to him, and that attachment was pulling me in another direction. In the following days, James made more efforts to talk to me. We started spending more time together. He suggested watching movies, cooking dinner, or simply walking in the park. I saw how sincerely he was trying to restore our connection, and it only deepened my guilt. I could no longer look at him the way I used to. Every time he was near, I felt the weight of what I was hiding. Thoughts of how he would react if he knew the truth swirled in my mind. My double life was becoming more complicated. I spent my days with James, but my thoughts constantly returned to Adam. In every look James gave me, I saw a question I couldn't answer. I knew I couldn't continue like this, but I also couldn't imagine how it would end. One evening, when James suggested we spend a weekend out of town together, I realized I could no longer ignore it. His attempts to mend our relationship were obvious, but they only intensified my internal struggle. My heart was torn between two men, and I didn't know how to escape this labyrinth of emotions. "Are you sure it's a good idea?" I asked, trying to hide the fear in my voice. "Why not? We haven't spent time together alone in a while, without work and other distractions. I think it'll help." He looked at me with hope, as if this was his last chance to bring us back to what we once were. I saw his efforts, his desire to make us closer, and it only deepened my guilt. But the truth was, I was no longer the person who could embrace those efforts. My attachment to Adam was growing stronger, and I knew I couldn't continue living this double life. "Okay," I finally said, though inside, I was torn apart. I knew I had to make a decision. I could no longer ignore my heart, but I also couldn't betray James, who was trying so hard to save our marriage. But every time I thought about the weekend with him, my thoughts returned to Adam. The intensifying situation was becoming unbearable, and I didn't know how much longer I could withstand the pressure. I couldn't believe that Adam and I were still continuing this. With each passing day, the pressure became unbearable, but along with it, our attraction to each other grew stronger. Inside me, a storm of emotions raged: fear, guilt, and an overwhelming desire. And even though I knew we were playing with fire, I couldn't make myself stop. Our meetings became more frequent, and each one felt like a challenge to fate. We understood that every time we risked being seen, someone could suspect something. But those thoughts only fueled us. Every moment spent together felt like the last, filled with passion and the awareness that it could all end at any moment. One evening after work, Adam and I decided to meet at a cafe near the office. It was risky. We knew that some of our colleagues could accidentally walk in, but the desire to be together was stronger. We sat at a table in the corner, trying to act as inconspicuously as possible, but in every glance, in every gesture, there was a sense of danger. "You realize we can't keep going like this, right?" Adam asked, his voice quiet, but I could hear the tension in it. "I know," I replied, though I didn't truly believe my own words. We had already gone too far to simply stop. Adam leaned in closer, his hand lightly brushing against mine under the table. The touch was barely noticeable to those around us, but for us, it meant so much more. I could feel my heart start to race. We both knew we were playing a dangerous game, but neither of us wanted to be the one to stop it. "I can't be without you," he whispered, his gaze fixed on mine. Those words pierced through me. A sharp pain emerged inside. I knew we were on the edge, but my feelings for Adam were so strong that I couldn't imagine returning to my old life. James was trying to save our marriage, but with each passing day, I felt more distant from him, and my bond with Adam grew stronger. "What are we going to do?" I whispered, feeling fear fill me. "We can't go on like this, but I can't let you go." Adam gently squeezed my hand under the table. "We'll find a way," he said confidently. "But for now, we need to be careful." Those words were supposed to comfort me, but instead, I felt the circle of danger tightening around us. We both knew we were playing with fire, and sooner or later, it would lead to consequences. A few days later, Adam and I met at his apartment. It was one of the few places where we could be together, without the fear of being caught. When I walked in, he greeted me with that look that always made my heart race. His touch, his warmth, it had all become an inseparable part of my life, something I could no longer live without. We spent the entire evening together, as if nothing existed outside that room. But even there, in his arms, I could feel the tension growing. We couldn't hide forever. At some point, our relationship would come to light, and that terrified me more than anything. "Are you ready for everything to change?" Adam asked after a long silence as we lay side by side. I sighed, closing my eyes. His words reminded me that we couldn't go on like this indefinitely. "I don't know," I admitted. "All I know is that I don't want to lose you." "You won't lose me." His voice was firm, but I could hear the same worry in it that I felt. We both knew the consequences could be devastating. The next day, I returned home to James, and his smile greeted me at the door. He looked happy, as if unaware of what was happening behind his back. That only deepened my guilt. He believed that our relationship could be saved, but I was already on the other side. "I booked us a trip," he said unexpectedly at dinner, and I nearly dropped my fork. "A trip?" I asked, trying to hide my surprise. "When?" "In 2 weeks. We're going to the coast, like we used to. I thought it might help us spend time together and work on things." My heart clenched at his words. James, without knowing about my betrayal, was trying to create a new chance for us to be together. But the truth was, I was already too deeply entangled in my feelings for Adam, and this trip felt more like a trap than a salvation. "That's wonderful," I whispered, but even to myself, the words sounded hollow. Every moment with James reminded me of how far I had gone. I was on the edge, and every step could lead to the collapse of everything I had. The next day, as I left work, I saw Adam standing near the office. He was leaning against the wall, waiting for me. When our eyes met, I felt a flutter inside me. "You look good," he said as he approached me. I smiled, but inside I was boiling. We stood so close to each other that it felt dangerous. "We need to be more careful," I said, glancing around. "I know," he replied, but in his eyes, I saw that this was the last thing on his mind. We walked further into the quiet alleys of the city, and though I knew the risk of being caught was growing, I couldn't make myself stop. Our feelings had consumed us entirely, and I realized that I was no longer in control of the situation. We were trapped by our emotions and passion, and there was no way out. In that moment, I realized that the game of risk had long since turned into betrayal, and soon we would have to pay the price for it. That day began like any other. Inside, the tension was growing, each moment with James feeling more strained, as if an invisible spring could unwind at any moment and destroy my life. I knew I was playing a dangerous game, but I couldn't give it up. My relationship with Adam had become more than just passion. It was something deeper, something that fed both my soul and body. But now I was on the edge, and every move we made could be fatal. I headed to my usual lunch at a cafe near work, where Adam and I often met. We always tried to be careful, choosing secluded spots and never staying too long. But that day, something went wrong. I arrived a little earlier, ordered coffee, and sat at a corner table, waiting for him to arrive. The minutes dragged on slowly, as if time was taunting me with its sluggishness. I spotted Adam as he entered the cafe, and my heart tightened in anticipation. But that moment turned out to be the last calm one. I heard a familiar voice and turned around. My heart stopped for a split second. At the door stood James, talking to a colleague. I had no idea he would be here. His appearance was a shock, and panic washed over me like a wave. He couldn't see us together. This was the moment I had feared, the moment that could destroy everything. I tried to stay calm, but inside I was screaming, "Run!" Just as James headed toward the counter, Adam approached my table, not noticing him. I saw how close they came to locking eyes, and a chill of terror ran through me. "Hi," Adam said softly, sitting down across from me as if it were just another ordinary day. His voice was calm, but I knew he sensed my tension. "You need to leave," I whispered, barely audible, feeling panic boiling inside me. I shot a quick glance toward James, who was still standing at the counter, unaware of us. Adam frowned slightly, turning his head just enough to see James. For a second, I saw Adam's face freeze before he quickly realized what was happening. "Is that him?" His voice became tense but remained quiet. I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. "You need to leave," I repeated, this time more urgently. I felt I could no longer control the situation. Inside, everything was a mess, fear of losing both Adam and James at the same time. Adam slowly stood up, his movements careful, as if trying not to draw attention. But it was already too late. James turned around just as Adam was about to leave. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. I didn't know what would happen next. Time seemed to slow down, and I watched as James stared at Adam, as if trying to recall if he had seen him before. I could feel the tension rising between them, the shadow of danger hanging in the air. "Hi, Rebecca," James finally said, his voice neutral, but a hint of suspicion slipped through. "Who's this?" My heart stopped. I couldn't find the words. This was the moment I had been trying to avoid all along, but now it was here, right in front of me. I knew that if I didn't come up with something convincing, everything would end in disaster. "This is a colleague," I forced out, feeling my throat go dry. "Adam, we were discussing a project." James nodded silently, his gaze lingering on Adam longer than necessary. I saw the suspicion flicker in his eyes. This wasn't the kind of moment I could easily lie my way out of. "Nice to meet you, Adam," James said, raising an eyebrow slightly. "You never mentioned you had new colleagues." His words cut through me, and I felt another wave of guilt crash over me. I knew James was starting to piece things together in his mind. He was too smart not to notice something was off. "I just started working with Rebecca recently," Adam said, his voice still calm, but I could see the tension in his eyes. "That's great." James looked at me with a faint smile, but I knew that behind that smile was confusion, maybe even jealousy. He wanted to know more, to understand why we were here together. "We should get the whole team together sometime. I'd love to meet the people you work with." Those words hung in the air like a warning. I could feel that everything was about to fall apart. James was already starting to suspect, and I didn't know how to handle the situation. "Of course," I replied, trying to sound calm, though inside I was trembling. I knew things would only get worse from here. Adam nodded, said his goodbyes, and quickly walked out of the cafe. I watched him leave, feeling my soul tearing apart. When I turned back to James, he was looking at me with the same expression, but now the confidence in his eyes was gone. "Are you okay?" he asked, studying me. "Yes," I replied, but it was a lie. I couldn't be okay. Inside, everything was collapsing, and I didn't know how to hold together something that was already falling apart. My betrayal was becoming too obvious, and soon it would come to light. When we returned home, I felt the end was near. James was silent, but his silence was deafening. I could see that his thoughts were elsewhere, that he no longer believed my words. Doubt was growing in his eyes, and it was the beginning of the end. After that encounter at the cafe, something changed in James. He became more attentive, but not in the way he used to be. Now, his focus wasn't just on our family life, but on details I once considered insignificant. He started asking questions, observing my behavior, and his looks became increasingly sharp. I could feel a wall of distrust growing between us. Every time I came home, it felt like he was searching for clues, something that could confirm his suspicions. It was unbearable. I couldn't find peace, and a growing sense of panic took root inside me. I tried to maintain a calm exterior, but inside, I was falling apart. The evening when everything finally started to crumble was especially tense. We sat at dinner, and James was, as usual, talking about his work. I tried to listen, but my thoughts kept drifting back to the incident at the cafe, to how Adam and James were now connected by that fateful encounter. I knew James hadn't forgotten about Adam, and though he hadn't asked any direct questions yet, his silence spoke louder than words. "How long have you known Adam?" he finally asked, breaking the long silence that had been hanging over us. I almost dropped my fork. The question was unexpected, though I knew it was bound to happen. He couldn't ignore what had happened any longer. "No," I replied, trying to sound calm. "We started working together a couple of months ago." "A couple of months?" he repeated, as if testing my words. His eyes stayed locked on mine, and I could feel the tension in his gaze growing. "Yes." I tried to sound confident, but inside, I was trembling. I knew that one wrong word, one misplaced emotion, could give me away. James nodded, but his look remained guarded. I knew that look. It was the same one he had when working on complex cases in court. It was the look of someone trying to figure out what's really going on, and I could tell he was beginning to suspect something far beyond just work. "You've been acting strange lately," he said after a few moments of silence. "Something has changed. Don't you want to tell me what's going on?" Everything inside me froze. I didn't know what to say. How could I explain what was happening? How could I confess to what I had been hiding for so long? "Everything's fine, James." I tried to remain calm. "It's just a lot at work, and I'm tired. It's temporary." "Temporary?" He repeated my words again, as if they didn't make sense to him. "Rebecca, I can feel you pulling away. You're not the same. Something has changed between us, and I want to know what it is." His voice grew tenser, a note of disappointment and perhaps even anger creeping in. I couldn't meet his eyes. Inside, everything screamed. I needed to say something, come up with an explanation, but I didn't know what. I realized the end was near, but I was still trying to cling to the thread that tied us together. "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied, though I didn't believe my own words. I saw the way his face tightened, the shadow of doubt in his eyes. "Do you think I don't see that you're hiding something?" His voice dropped lower, but I could hear the rising anger. I'm not an idiot, Rebecca. What's going on between you and Adam? That question cut through the air like thunder. I hadn't expected him to say it so directly, though it was inevitable. I sat across from him, feeling my life crumble around me, and couldn't find the words. How could I answer? I couldn't confess, but lying any longer seemed pointless. Nothing, I finally said, but my lie was too obvious. I saw his eyes flare with anger. Nothing, he nearly hissed. Do you really think I'm that naive? I see everything, Rebecca. Your behavior, your meetings, and this Adam. Do you think I haven't noticed how you've changed? You're not the same anymore. You're hiding something from me, and I want to know what it is. I felt tears welling up, but I couldn't let them fall. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. All the lies, my double life, were collapsing, and I could no longer stop it. You don't understand, I began, but he interrupted me. No, I understand everything. His voice was cold, almost distant. I understand that you're betraying me, and I want to know how long this has been going on. His words pierced through me like a knife. I couldn't lie anymore, but I couldn't admit the truth either. My life was at a dead end, and I saw no way out. James, I began, but again he cut me off. I don't want to hear any more of your lies. I know what's happening. I just want to hear it from you. His words were like blows, each one cutting deep. I saw the light fade from his eyes, the hope that we still had a chance disappearing. I couldn't hide the truth anymore, but I also couldn't bring myself to speak it. The silence dragged on. I sat across from the man I had once loved more than anything in the world, and I couldn't say a word. This was my betrayal, and I knew I would have to pay for it. The only question was what the price would be. When James stood up and walked out of the room, I was left alone, surrounded by a silence that pressed down on me like a heavy blanket. I knew it was the end. Our end. After that conversation with James, the tension in the house became unbearable. He no longer asked questions, but his silence spoke volumes. It was clear he hadn't calmed down. I could sense that he was preparing for something, that behind that silence was a storm that would eventually break. I tried to avoid his gaze, left for work early, and returned late, but this only worsened the situation. I knew the end was near, and that with each passing day, my lies were becoming more fragile, ready to collapse at any moment. That day, I decided to meet Adam after work. We agreed to meet at the same cafe where we usually sat, away from prying eyes. I felt like I was on the edge. Every meeting with him was my escape from reality, but now I knew we were getting closer to catastrophe. My heart was pounding as I walked down the street to the cafe, trying to stay calm. When I entered, Adam was already waiting for me. A wave of relief washed over me the moment I saw him. He was the person who made me feel alive, the one who understood me when James no longer did. But at that moment, I had no idea I was being watched. James had followed me. I don't know how he found out about our meeting, but his suspicions had grown so strong that he decided to take this step. He walked into the cafe without me realizing he was there. Adam and I sat together, our hands intertwined on the table, and at that moment, I felt his lips brush against mine. It was that very moment that turned my whole life upside down. "What the hell is going on?" James's voice boomed. The world seemed to freeze. I pulled away from Adam, my eyes locking with James's. His eyes blazed with anger, pain, and disappointment. I had never seen him like that. Everything I had hidden for so long now surfaced. There was no more room for lies, no more way out. Adam froze too, shocked by what was happening. We both knew this was the end. "James," I began, trying to say something, but the words caught in my throat. I didn't know what to say. How could I explain all of this to him? "You cheated on me," James interrupted, his voice shaking with fury. He looked like he was on the verge of losing it. "You've been lying to me all these months, Rebecca? Is this who you've been with all this time?" I wanted to answer, but I couldn't. Every word he spoke cut me like a knife. The guilt was unbearable. I knew his pain was caused by my actions, and I could no longer deny it. "You were meeting with him behind my back, kissing him." His gaze shifted to Adam. "And you, what are you doing with my wife?" Adam stood up, his face remaining calm, but I could see the fire burning inside him. He realized the situation had spiraled out of control, and there was nothing left to change. "James, I can explain," Adam began, but James cut him off, stepping forward. Explain? He nearly shouted the word. You want to explain how you seduced my wife? How you ruined our marriage? Or maybe you want to explain why I had to figure this out myself, instead of hearing the truth from her. His voice trembled with rage, and I saw his hands clenching into fists. I realized the situation had escalated beyond reason. This was the confrontation I had feared for so long. James, stop, I finally managed to say, but his focus was solely on Adam. I knew he couldn't hear my words right now. Stop? His gaze was filled with hatred. You don't even understand what you've done. You betrayed me, Rebecca. I trusted you. I tried to save our marriage, but you had already chosen him long ago, hadn't you? I couldn't look at him. Everything he said was true. I could no longer deny my guilt. But explaining it all wasn't that simple. My heart was torn in two, and I didn't know how to choose between them. James, it's not like that. I tried to start, but his anger only grew. Not like that. He moved closer to me, his face full of pain. Then what is it, Rebecca? You kissed him right in front of me. Is this what you wanted? I was silent. I couldn't find the words. My betrayal was too obvious, and I could no longer hide behind excuses. Everything between us collapsed in that moment. I saw the light in James's eyes fade, watched him turn into a stranger consumed by pain and disappointment. I knew that this moment had destroyed everything we had. Our marriage was broken, and it was my fault. Leave, James finally said, his voice filled with despair. I don't want to see you anymore. I felt my world crumble around me. I had known this moment was inevitable, but that didn't make it any less painful. I looked at James, the man I had once loved, and understood that it was all over. I had lost him. James, I started, but he raised his hand to stop me. Leave, he repeated, and there was no longer any anger in his voice, only exhaustion. Please. I knew there was no point in continuing. Everything had already been decided. I stood up, slowly stepping away from the table, and Adam followed me. We walked out of the cafe, and I felt the weight of everything I had done crash down on me. My life was in ruins, and I had no idea how to piece it back together. When Adam and I stepped out onto the street, I stopped, feeling like I couldn't breathe. Everything I had built, everything I had, was destroyed. I can't do this anymore, I whispered, looking at Adam. It's over. He didn't know what to say. I could see that he was just as crushed by what had happened. Our affair, which had once seemed like my salvation, had now turned into a disaster, and I didn't know what would come next. We stood in silence, and I felt the weight of our choices hanging between us. I knew I couldn't keep living this way, but I didn't know what to do now. All that remained were the ruins of my marriage, and a love lost forever. Just a few days had passed since that fateful confrontation in the cafe, but those days felt like an eternity. My life, which was once filled with stability and routine, had now turned into chaos. Every morning, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest, as if a weight was pressing down on my shoulders, making it hard to breathe. James no longer spoke to me. After the scene at the cafe, he immediately moved out to stay with friends, and soon sent me a message saying he had filed for divorce. His words held no anger or resentment, just exhaustion and complete emptiness. He had made his choice, and I couldn't blame him for it. I knew I deserved every bit of the pain he was feeling. Saying goodbye to James turned out to be much harder than I had imagined. When I entered our home to gather my things, I was met with an unfamiliar silence. This house had once echoed with our laughter, our conversations, our memories, but now all of that felt distant, like a past life from which nothing remained but empty rooms. I walked through our home, packing my things into boxes, and with each item I placed inside, I said goodbye to the moments when we were happy. Here was our wedding album, where we both laughed in the photos, where everything seemed so simple and right. I opened it, flipped through a few pages, and the tears began to fall on their own. This marriage wasn't just part of my life, it was part of my soul. And now that part was lost forever. James sat in the living room while I packed my things. I saw him from a distance, his shoulders slumped, his gaze fixed on the window, as if he was trying to avoid the need to look at me again. I understood him. After everything I had done, I didn't deserve forgiveness. I'm ready, I said quietly, not knowing how else to begin the conversation. He turned to face me, his eyes meeting mine. but they no longer held the warmth they once did. These were the eyes of the man I had once loved, but now they looked at me with cold detachment. "All right." His voice was hoarse, as though he hadn't spoken in a long time. He paused, then added, "I don't know what to say, Rebecca. I thought we could get through this, but—" He didn't finish. His words were interrupted by his own thoughts. I knew he couldn't talk about it anymore. Everything was too clear. We couldn't get through this. "I don't know either," I whispered. "I'm sorry." They were simple words, but they were full of the regret I carried inside me. I knew these words couldn't fix anything that had already happened, but I still needed to say them. James nodded, as if he understood what I was trying to express, but he couldn't listen any longer. He turned back toward the window, signaling that the conversation was over. Our lives had been intertwined for so many years, but now they were splitting apart.